All right, so welcome, Jai. Welcome to the class. You're here with us for the first time. I hope you learned something new today and you find today's lesson interesting, and then you can consider joining the full-time class. So the main part of what we're covering today, right, boys and girls, would be this one: sequencing and logic in our compositions. All right, logic seems to be something that's very lacking in a lot of students' writing. All right, for some reason, they think that when they call for the ambulance, it appears in like a split second. And then the paramedics, right, can load someone up into the stretcher within like 5 minutes, that kind of thing. That doesn't happen. Right, that doesn't happen. Even if you call for an ambulance, it probably will take at least, all right, at least 7 minutes to reach your location, right? Most of the time, it will take 10 to 15 minutes. And when the paramedics come, depending on what kind of injury it is and all that, right? If it's very minor, they can get you loaded up, ready to go within like 5 minutes, no problem. But all right, if it's, where you're bleeding profusely, you can't breathe, your heart rate is irregular and stuff like that, they have to stabilize you first on the spot, right? Make sure that you're not bleeding too much, you're not bleeding out, your heart rate is regular, you can breathe properly, then they can transport you, okay? If not, they run the risk of you dying in the ambulance. So sometimes it's not that students don't have logic, it's that they don't know these things and they imagine it happening, but their imagination is very far from reality. All right, that's what's happening most of the time. We're also going to talk about writing falling actions and conclusions, right? Conclusions are very important. A lot of you are using this technique where you say, at the end of the day, blah, blah, blah learns this and that, this and that. Okay, this is one way to go about doing it, but this is not the best way actually. There are a few better ways to go about ending your story than to say, at the end of the day, Joseph learned to be a more generous person, that kind of thing. Like, what? Come on, seriously. That is like so 10 years ago technique. I'll be covering some better techniques at the end of the lesson, right, when we cover this part here. Where did my pen drop to? Okay, never mind. But we will have some grammar close questions today and some open-ended comprehension today as well. But the main part would be the composition writing part here. Now, let me just get everyone's results online. For those of you who have completed the pre-lesson tasks, all right, your answers would be with me and I'll be able to have a look at it and see whether you got it correct or wrong, all right, and then I can correct you. And I can also see why, most people, what the wrong answers were in the first place, all right? So thank you to Brian, Emma, Felix, Jai, Jaslyn, Jerusha, Marco, Marissa, Pranyush, Rachel, Regina, Rina, Kaihan, and Yutaka for completing their work online before they came, so I can see what your answers were, all right? And I can kind of gauge why you got it wrong. Now, moving on to the next part, here are the 88's house rules. You guys know what the rules are, all right, but I'm just going to cover it very quickly for Jai. All right, it's compulsory to leave your video on and mute your microphone. If you need to talk, to ask a question, answer a question, or share feedback, use the chat function in Zoom and chat with me in the chat. All right. If you need to go to the toilet, same thing, let me know during the chat, right? You can just go by yourself. Don't need to wait for me to give you permission, but please return as soon as you can. And you can only do that if your video is on. If not, I won't know whether you're stuck in the toilet or something. So I need all your videos to be on, please. If there's something urgent, you can always raise your hand using the Zoom function of raise your hand and wait for my permission to speak, and then you can start speaking. All right, at all times, be respectful to all your fellow students and me. Let's start. Grammar close. So grammar close is one of the easier parts of your exams because they actually give you the helping words at the top. But the problem is you only have 10 questions, but you have 15 helping words. So that means out of the 15 helping words, you don't need to use 5. And that's where the trick comes in. All right, that's where it gets really tricky. So that's the whole thing about this whole grammar close part. But grammar close is something, right, that the more you read, like the more storybooks you read, the more magazines you read, the more periodic articles, the more Reader's Digest, the more comic books you read and stuff like that, the better you are at grammar close because everything becomes more like a second nature, like instinct to you. right? So that's how you can master grammar close. Okay, if you don't think about it too hard, all right, and you kind of like go with your instinct. If you have a good instinct, you can get 10 upon 10 for this, no problem, all right? If not, then you will have to know what the grammar rules are surrounding each and every question here. So let's have a look at the first one. Blacksmithing is the what of forging metal. Now, if you don't know what blacksmithing is over here, they call these people blacksmiths, right? It's not because, you know, that they are, you know, like that color or whatever, but they're called blacksmithing, right? Because they are always covered in soot, all right, from the coal fires that they have to stoke. So the fires are so hot, all right, that they have to constantly feed the fires with coal, and that coal smoke is all over them. So when they walk out, right, and then when you see them, they're always covered in black soot. And that's why it's called blacksmithing in the first place. Okay, and it's actually the skill of forging swords and forging metalware, you know, and helping your, from the simplest things to helping your horse to hammer their horseshoe properly, right, in shape, and to correct it, all the way to forming some of the most beautiful katanas and swords in the world, or forming shields, right, and armor. So that's what blacksmiths actually do. All right, it's actually easier to form a good armor than to form a good sword, because a sword requires so much hammering of the steel or whatever metal that they are using, right, into that very thinly fine blade, such that, right, it cuts very, very well, but yet, right, it doesn't break when it cuts. So that's the mark of a good sword. All right, we'll have a look at a bit of a blacksmithing later, but this is what we're talking about, right? The main theme of our grammar close passage over here. I'm really excited about this because blacksmithing is a really, really cool profession, and it's a dying profession as well. Not a lot of people in the world are willing to do this because, number one, you have to spend a lot of time in a very hot environment and sweaty environment. And number two, you have to learn it for a very long time, right? You would be apprenticed to a blacksmith for at least 7 to 8 years before you can be a blacksmith yourself. And at that time, you're not even a master blacksmith. To be a master, you have to at least put in 20 years of effort in order to be a master blacksmith. Even harder than becoming a specialist doctor, okay? So blacksmithing is the what? Blacksmithing is the art, all right? It is the art. It's one art only. So the answer here is B, right? It is the art, all right? So B is out. And I can tell you immediately, right? A is arts. It looks so familiar to B over there. You may actually make a mistake and put A as your answer, but you don't realize that blacksmithing is, look at this. If they're using is, it must be singular, because is the transitive verb for singular subjects, isn't it? So blacksmithing is the art of forging metal into, you forge something into something else. So previously it was just a flat piece of metal, right? And then you forge it into a usable tool, into a usable object. So over here, the answer is Q, into. You forge it into something. All right, like a hammer and an anvil to make objects like hinges, nails, and more. So nails are like the most basic type of metal forging of blacksmithing. So if you're an apprentice, you would probably be doing a lot of nails and a lot of horseshoes, and you would be helping people to forge simple things like hammers and chisels and stuff like that. All right. It was a common practice before the Industrial Revolution. That's why now it's very rare to find true blacksmiths, right? Industrial Revolution was when we started to mechanize everything and use machines to make our products instead of relying on these blacksmiths to make our products. Now, it's a good thing. Now everyone can afford a hammer, everyone can afford a chisel to, you know, do repairs at home or to build furniture or whatever. In the past, not everyone could do it, right? Because it's expensive to get the blacksmith to smith something like that out for you. All right, so it's a good thing. So now blacksmiths, they don't, you know, do these things much anymore. They focus more on the ones that are more money making, like smithing really good swords, or things like armors and shields for collectors, basically. So it was a common practice before the Industrial Revolution, when most towns had their own blacksmith, right? They had their own blacksmith. So every town had their own blacksmith. If not, the people there can't live very well. They won't have all the metal tools to use to build their fences, right? To build the houses and stuff like that. Also, it was known, right, as a village smithy, right? Why do we use known and not knows over here? Why is it known? Because known is actually the past participle, which tells us that it has been known for a very long time. Then we use the past participle because the first form of this is know, right? The second form of this is the simple past. Knew is the past of know. And the third form of this is known. Okay? There really isn't a fourth form. Fourth form is just adding ing behind, basically. So when we say the third form, right, it's actually the one most in the past. That's why it is known, which means it is known, like everyone knows it, right? It is known as a village smithy. So we can call it a blacksmith shop. We can call it a village smithy, both work. And there we go. We have the answers for questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, B, Q, H, and E. All right. I see that for question 1, most of you got it correct, so I'm not going to cover that too much. But for question 2, okay, a lot of you actually put Q and you got it wrong. Now that's a mistake in the system, right? The system actually listed P, right? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. You know what? Of forging metal into tools like a hammer and an anvil to make. Oh, no. Sorry. My mistake. Didn't read it properly. Question 2. The answer is actually P. It's my mistake. So they use the hammer and the anvil to make the objects like hinges and nails. So the hammer is your basically hammer. You've seen Thor's hammer, right? Like the hammer. And an anvil is something that's shaped like that. Oops. Shaped like that. Ah. All right. And then with a white base, that's an anvil. And then the metal is placed over here. And then you would hammer it. You would hammer it. Ding, 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 ding. That's the anvil. All right. So it is the art of forging metal using tools like a hammer and anvil. So number 1 is B. Number 2 is P, right? That's the things that they are using basically. All right. A lot of you put Q. You make the same mistake like Mr. Joel as well, right? Of forging metal into tools. The first thing that came into our mind is forging metal, and then the preposition is into. All right. So I think I would have made that mistake as well. Quite careless. All right. And then question 3, the answer is H. All of you got it correct. Question 4, the answer is E. All of you got it correct online as well. Okay, the part that's a bit iffy is question 5, which is the next part. In the late 1800s, factories and mass production reduced the demand. Reduce the demand what? Reduce the demand for, right? There's no of. The first thing that came into my mind is reduce the demand of smith tools, but there's no of here. So it reduced the demand for smith tools, right? So previously, what did we use? We used B, P, H, E. Let's cancel that here so we don't look at the same things. B, P, H, and E. And over here, we've used G as well. Let's cancel that. All right, for smith tools and hardware. Today, blacksmithing is regaining popularity as blacksmiths were more interested in forging their own tools, right? And modern blacksmith groups offer support, education, and a sense of community. So what should we put for number 6? So number 6 is one that a lot of you got it correct as well. Good. All right. Blacksmiths become more interested in forging their own tools, right? And then modern blacksmith groups offer support, education, and a sense of community. What this growing niche, all right? Niche is actually specialty. This growing specialty. So number 7, the answer is actually K. I believe, and a sense of community around. So